first of all, we're going to define asynchronous teaching and learning and really get on the same page about what we're talking about in a general sense. And then we're going to talk about student engagement, which is, in my humble opinion, the key to really high quality asynchronous teaching. And then within the context of student engagement, we're going to show you Canvas tools that can assist you with the development or with the teaching, I would say development and delivery of asynchronous content and interactions in your courses. So let's begin with the definition of asynchronous teaching and learning. Asynchronous teaching and learning online is a delivery mode that leverages educational technology, such as Canvas, for example, to create online learning content and opportunities for students to engage with the content. These online opportunities, the teaching and learning that goes on in an asynchronous class, are things that do not occur at the same time, and they're not live. So that's the asynchronous nature of it, is that students do not have to be in a certain place at a certain time, and you don't have to be at a certain place at a certain time. With that in mind, that what appears to be somewhat disconnected the distance between teachers and students in asynchronous courses, it is extremely important that student engagement motivates what you do in an asynchronous classroom. The reason is, first of all, that for our context at UNC, especially where we are right now, an asynchronous classroom is not a correspondence course. It's not a self-paced course. It is a live, living, breathing course. You do have deadlines for things. You have time limits for things. We started on August 24th and we're going to end on December 13th. And we want to bring students along that journey in a measured way so that they can reach the end along with everybody else. So it's asynchronous, but it's very much present. And we're going to talk more about student engagement and how student engagement plays such a central role in asynchronous course content delivery. So before we talk about that, let's talk about some pros and cons. So in an asynchronous environment, some of the pros are that it is a more flexible time frame. And so you'll often find fully online courses, which are asynchronous by nature, that you'll have a lot more adult student learners in those courses. And it's because of their time constraints, whether it be with work or with family, they have more time constraints. And so this content delivery mode is much more flexible. There are also more opportunities, and when we think about our younger students or students who are not used to being students yet, just getting going, there are more opportunities for reflection. And we have to get them engaged first, clearly, but they do have more time in an asynchronous space to think about what they want to say. In a synchronous classroom, there's a little bit more performance pressure, and sometimes you'll have students who will just fall back and just listen. In an asynchronous model might work really well for some of those students who are less extroverted and who perform really well, but perhaps need a little bit more time to reflect and a little bit less pressure. And so the main pro is that there is space and time in an asynchronous environment for students and teachers also to practice, to shape, and to communicate their ideas. Some of the cons is that it is less conversational, it's less spontaneous, and you lose the non-verbal cues and other non-verbal communication things that you get when you're in a synchronous space. Even when you're online and synchronous, you have more verbal cues, non-verbal cues, and so you lose that. There's no immediate feedback, and for some, there's no immediate gratification. There is still feedback, but it's not immediate. And so the biggest thing I think that you lose in asynchronous teaching and learning is that loss of the synergy that happens when people come together and they're talking things out in real time with each other. So that synergistic creation of knowledge that you can get in a synchronous space. So you lose that. So we have to design for that. We have to design, we have to think ahead, and we have to come up with different delivery methods and methodologies to account for the asynchronous learning. And one of the best tools, best things that I have to offer you for thinking that through is to focus on student engagement, because student engagement is at the core of teaching and learning. And I know that a lot of people are really struggling with this right now. How do I get my students involved in the classroom? And so as the instructors, it's extremely important that we focus, and we're doing as much as we can to help with this, to be able to focus on creating opportunities for student engagement. So the areas that we need to work on with creating those opportunities are going to be creating opportunities for students to engage with the course content. So we have to be very intentional about that. We also have to be very intentional about creating opportunities for student engagement with instructors. So how do we engage with students one-on-one or one-to-many? How do we get students talking and working with us as instructors? And then finally, how to get students engaged with each other. That student-to-student engagement is a very powerful way to get people learning and to get people involved and coming back for more. So we're going to talk about tools in Canvas with those things in mind. I'm going to hand it over to Tyler to talk with us about one of the big tools in asynchronous content design and delivery, and that is Panopto. So Tyler, go ahead and take it away.
All right. As soon as you've created a video, you can create a video up here with the Create button, Record New Session, or you can upload a previously recorded video. But as soon as you have done so, you can go ahead and highlight over the video and click Edit. Now from the Edit screen, you have lots of different options. However, we are going to focus on the Quiz option tool. So if you look down towards the bottom of the screen, you will see that I am moving my bar along the editing timeline. If I choose that I want a video at exactly 1 minute, I can go ahead and click that bar, or I can watch the video and just hit pause when I'm ready to insert my questions. As soon as I'm at my location, you can hit the Add button, and you can click Add Quiz. And from here, you'll be able to add your question type. You can add your answers. You can add more answers, or more distractors, I should say. You can also add another question. You have several question options, including true, false, multiple choice, multiple select, and fill in the blank. My advice is to not have these questions be mind benders, but to have them be rather basic. Remember that they're supposed to be engaging with the material that you just taught. What's great about this is that your students not only become active inside of the lecture instead of passively watching, you also get statistics that can allow you to get a better scope of if your students are understanding the material or not. You can add multiple questions to your quiz, but as soon as you're done, you can hit done and you can select from these options. Please feel free to select whichever options best fit your situation. And as soon as you're finished, you can hit finish. Your video will begin to play, and you can add another quiz inside the same video at another time if you wish. The second tool that we're going to be looking at actually comes after you embed the video into a page. Now for this, I've already pre-embedded a video for this demonstration. But as soon as you have your Panopto video embedded within your page, your students will be able to click this up arrow. And from this up arrow, they will see a table of contents, which allows them to skip around the lecture or revisit information that they would like to revisit or need some reinforcement on. But in terms of engagement, there is a discussion board. All the comments are time-stamped. You can see that they posted 8 minutes ago, and you can see that there are replies. Once again, also time-stamped. So you'll know exactly when and how the students are interacting with the material, and where they are in the information.
And we're going to go to Rebecca, who's going to discuss discussion forums, a mainstay in online courses.
I'm going to talk to you about some of the options you have when setting up your discussions and setting up your discussion prompts. As you know, discussions and group activities are collegial in nature, and so they really provide an opportunity for engagement and scholarly investigation, where all of the learners, even the instructor, has an opportunity to engage with the content in a very authentic way. And so as we go to discussions, we're going to talk about some of the options you have when setting one up. So when you set up your discussion, you obviously have your space to create your prompt, which we'll come back and talk about. But let's talk about your options here. By default, Canvas creates a focused reply, and you can choose to click this to make it a threaded reply, but the easiest way to probably describe that is to show you. And so a focused reply is where you can reply either directly to the prompt, or if you are replying to someone else, you only are able to reply at the end of that group of posts. The difference is in a threaded response, you can reply at any point in the discussion. So you can reply to the prompt and you can reply at any time. And so when you're deciding if you want this to be focused or threaded, you probably want to be thinking about, do you want everything organized, or do you want to give that discussion the opportunity to grow legs and perhaps a life of its own? Another nice feature is this users must post before seeing replies. And what happens when you select that is that the student must post their reply and must post their own thinking before they're able to see what their colleagues or peers have posted. There is a way around it. If you allow editing in your replies, then students can simply post a blank response and read what other people have written and then edit theirs. But it is a nice way to encourage students to create their own thinking before reading what their peers are thinking. Another option you have is to make this graded or ungraded. And some examples of ungraded assignments are places where you can provide a course FAQ, where students can ask questions and the instructor can answer them, or other students can answer them. But if it's a question that more than one person has, this is a great central location for students to check. I've also seen it used for quiz and exam reviews, where students ask questions and kind of do their studying online. But if you choose to make this a graded assignment, watch what happens to the rest of this page. Because as soon as you say, yes, this is a graded assignment, Canvas is going to recognize it as an assignment, not just a discussion. And so once you select that, Canvas is now going to provide you with a place for you to include points, a place for you to set your assignment group, due dates, and so it will all of a sudden enable many of the features that you're familiar with assignments. The other thing is it will then populate the gradebook as well. Kathy is going to be talking about setting up groups momentarily, but when you choose to make this a group discussion, you should know two things. Number one, you don't want to set up your groups here. You want to set up your groups under people, and Kathy is going to talk about that. But the other thing you should know about group discussions versus group assignments is Canvas is going to expect that each student is submitting their own information, and you will have the opportunity to grade each student individually. When you set up a group assignment, Canvas is expecting just one submission, and you can say whether you want to give the entire group the same grade or if you want to grade each person in the group individually. But in group discussions, Canvas recognizes that each student is going to be doing their own submission. And so it is set up that way. And group discussions are really nice for bigger classes because it gives students the opportunity to communicate and engage with each other without being lost in the shuffle. So if you find that you have a fairly large roster, a group discussion is always a good way to go to make those a little bit more manageable for the students. The other thing I want to talk about is the creation of the prompt. And in Understanding by Design, we talk about the essential question, which is something that is created deliberately to engage students throughout the course of a unit or a chapter or however you're organizing your units of learning. But an essential question is something that goes to the heart of the discipline. It occurs naturally in the field. In other words, a practitioner in the field of history would be asking the same questions as a history discussion prompt or a history essential question. It's something that's going to raise other important questions. It's not going to be a one and done answer the question and move on. It should provoke more inquiry and more desire to learn. And it's not going to have a right and wrong answer. There may be several facets to it, and there it's likely going to be disagreement, which gets to that fifth point of it's deliberately framed to be provocative and sustain students' interest. And so here's a few ideas to get started. In, for example, a nursing course, you may want your learners to ask themselves, how do they do an intake for a patient? What type of factors do they look at? And you could simply ask them to list those priorities. Or here's an example of a case study. Each participant is going to have to prioritize the information and how they're going to deal with it themselves. Going back to that history example, we are told that we live in unprecedented times. We could ask students to do an easy compare and contrast to World War II, or we can make it more open-ended. We could ask a question such as, does history repeat itself? And we can ask them to not only make a connection to an element of history that they identify with right now, but also be prepared to defend that thinking and defend why they think that this time is most similar to another era. Here's a question that keeps me up at night. What happened to Atticus Finch? Was his character always the same? Was it just Scout who grew up? This is a question that gets at the heart of a discipline. This is something that practitioners in literature are asking themselves. Finally, your prompt responses don't always have to be paragraphs. They can be data displays, they can be images, they can be graphic organizers. You can ask your students to create and share those creations through the discussion prompt, and they'll then have the opportunity to see how their peers interacted with the content or how their peers interpreted the new content.
Thank you so much, Rebecca, and thanks, Tyler. And what we are going to talk about now are just a few more tools inside of Canvas that are really good for promoting engagement. And the first of those is groups. So Canvas allows you the ability to set up student groups. And when you do that, you can do a lot of different things with those groups. So the first, most obvious thing, I guess, that you can do with groups is have group discussions. So let me start there. Here's a group discussion. If I go into the group discussion, and I realize that you've already seen this, but just to clarify, when you select this is a group discussion, or you select this is a group assignment in assignments because you have the same option. In Canvas, when you select this, you're given an opportunity to set up a group right here. And it is one of the things that I really don't like about Canvas, because it does make you think as an instructor, and if you've never done this before, that you can set up your groups here. And I'm here to tell you that you can't set up your groups here. So I would do everything you can to avoid this. We'll cancel this. And instead, let me show you where you set up groups. And then once your groups are set up, then you can use this in a very effective way. So let's go into people, because people is at the foundation of groups. And so what you'll see along with your roster are these tabs across the top. So the first tab is everyone, and then you have groups. And in this course right now, I don't have any groups. So when I click on this tab, I get a message as an instructor, and actually the students get the same message, that they can create their own groups. So do keep that in mind. You can turn that off in Canvas, but by default, students can set up their own groups, which is kind of a cool thing about Canvas. It can be a little alarming to instructors if you don't know this and all of a sudden you've got groups. Students can set them up. You're going to set them up here by clicking on Group Set. And so this is the same window that you got when we were back in the discussion. And what this is telling you is create a set of groups, because we're going to divide the class into X number of groups. So what is that set of groups going to be called? So the first one will be discussion groups. Okay. When you set up a group, you can allow students to sign up for the group. So it would be first come, first served. In that case, you would define how many groups in the class and what the student limit number of people in per group is. You can also split up the groups, have Canvas split up the groups itself. So Canvas can randomly split the groups. If you had 30 people, you can say split it up into 5 groups, and Canvas will randomly put people into 6 groups. There are some other things that you can do here, like you can create group leaders. So there are a few other little things that you can do. So we'll want to explore that. The third major way of setting up groups is to create them manually. So if you know your students and you know which groups you don't want them to choose, you don't want it to be random, you want to create it, then you do, I'll create groups manually. And you save this. And so now this is the set. The set of groups becomes a tab, and then you add groups to the tab. So I'll do group 1 for discussions, and I'm not going to worry about limiting the number. I'm creating these manually, and then I'll have group 2. And so these are the groups now. And if you open this up, you can see that you can just drag, pick this name up and drop and create the groups this way. And it's just as easy as that. And this part that I just did of putting people into groups is the part that does not happen inside of an assignment or a discussion. So it looks like you've created groups, but actually you just created a tab called Group Set rather than actually assigning the groups. So now that I've created these groups and assigned them, if I go back to that assignment, which is my group discussion, and I go in here to say this is a group discussion, and then I select, I have one of the choices I have here is discussion groups. And so that's the method that you want to use if you're doing project work or group discussions right there. And then you save this and you'll see that your discussion looks different. And now you can basically, group 1 will only see group 1's discussion and group 2 will only see group 2. You'll see all of them. There is another advantage to creating groups, and I'll go back to people and I'll show you, you can use groups many times. We got discussion groups. We can also create a group set called project groups. Okay, so I'm going to do a project. And I'll go ahead and manually create those as well. And then I'll do plus group just to review this. Group 1 project and group 2. You might want to use more creative names. I use very simple names when I'm presenting, but you actually probably want more specific names that tell students more about what the group is, what it's about. Okay, so there we have groups again. Works exactly the same way. I've created these project groups. So now these folks are going to work together on a project, and I do have an assignment that I'm going to show you that they can work on. But the other thing that happens in Canvas when you create groups is that the groups get their own little work site They get their own little Canvas site that uses Canvas tools where they can come together and asynchronously work together. So this is a big component of the peer-to-peer part of student engagement. And I want to show you that these little sites from the groups area, once you create this, if you go to these 3 dots right here and click on this, you'll see that first you can edit or delete the group, but you'll also see that you can visit the group homepage. So I want you to watch what happens over here and the top left of your screen when I visit the group homepage. I have moved. I'm in a different place in Canvas, and that place belongs to group 1. They have their own homepage. They can post announcements to one another. They can create pages. They can create discussions. They can also access group discussions here. They can share files. They can do collaborations with things like Google Docs, and they can also have Zoom meetings. Although I'm not sure that this Zoom meetings is a link in here, just know that your students can have Zoom meetings because they all have Zoom accounts. So this area is a wonderful place for students to be able to work together and share information and talk with each other asynchronously on a project. So another project that is a group project that allows for students to engage with one another is a wiki. And this isn't obvious. It's not listed as a tool inside of Canvas. But what is true is that Canvas is built using wiki technology. So if you think about Wikipedia, that is this encyclopedia out online where students can contribute to pages that have been created, and they can go in and edit and add, and they can, you know, as a group, they can create this web page together. You can do this in Canvas as well. And the place that you do it, I've set up some pages. What I've done here is created a module for wikis so that if you wanted to use wikis in your class, you can, this is one way to organize it. It's just a page, it's a regular page. So if I go to this page, Group 1 Wiki that I've already set up, the difference between this page and any other page in Canvas is under Edit. And I'll open this up a little bit. If you go down, whoops, actually you don't have to go down far at all. It's right here on this page. One of the options, the way it's set automatically by default, is for only teachers. But one of your options on any page is to also allow students to work on this page. And what that means when you do this is that as a student, I can add things to this course. So let me demonstrate for you. If I go to my student view, whoops. If I go to student view, now I'm a student, go into modules and group, let's say there's an assignment, a wiki assignment. The wiki assignment tells me what I need to do, and it actually provides me with a link to the page I was just on. So I can click on that link. And here's the page we were just on. Now, as a student, I don't usually have this, but because this, I've set it up as a wiki, I can go in here and I can add information. I take on Foo Fighters. Okay. And they can add anything. They can use, they basically have access to the rich content editor, which is here, and everything that's here, including images, videos, files, formatting, tables. They can do any kind of work here that these tools across the top will allow. And then when they're finished with this work, they can submit it as an assignment. So I'll go ahead and save, and I'll copy this URL right here at the top. Just copy that because that's the location of this. And then as a student, I can go to the wiki assignment and I can submit that assignment. And I have the assignment set up to accept a URL, paste that URL and submit it. And now your student has submitted the wiki as the assignment, the completed wiki. Now, as an instructor, go back to the course, go to the wiki assignment, and I can see here that I have a submission. And so I can look at that submission using SpeedGrader. And what Canvas is doing is loading up that web page. Now I have to view it. You can just click on it. And it's loading up the web page for me here in SpeedGrader so that I can grade it. Which brings me to the final topic that I want to cover today with regard to student engagement. One of the ways in which I think you can engage your students, maybe more than any of these ways where you've provided them with opportunities to do work, especially in a one-on-one engagement, which is you and the student and the instructor, is to provide feedback to students on their work. Now, I know that especially with written works that it takes a lot of time, and there really is a lot of different energy that you have to put into providing feedback, but I would argue that the using assessments and assignments that require students to communicate with you, whether it be in text or on video or in any kind of media, to communicate with you, gives you the opportunity to communicate back with them about what they're doing in the class. And I would say that you can do all of these other things and set them up really well, but your presence in the class is probably the most important thing. And if you're engaging with students one-on-one, especially through their work, by giving them feedback, I think that's what sets great classes apart from really good classes. So I want to encourage you to explore and use all of the different tools that you have to provide feedback to students. One of them is here in SpeedGrader. And now I need to go to a different assignment. So I'm going to come right back to SpeedGrader, but I'm going to go to written assignment. So here's a written assignment that has a rubric. And so I'm going to show you 3 different ways that you can provide feedback to students using Canvas. So here's a written assignment. The first way is right here in this box. This gray header, this whole box is called Doc Viewer. And this is very much like Microsoft Word, where you can provide feedback. So I can select things and I can post little comments about this. So comment about this point. Okay, I can select text. Oops. All right, so I'm having a little bit. Select text this way and then create a comment. So I can provide in-text comments that are feedback about what's going on in the written work. In addition to that, if I'm using rubrics, I can view the rubric inside of SpeedGrader, and I can provide comments. I could give somebody, let's say, 18 points on their performance of the use of sources, and then I can also provide them with feedback about using sources. Okay, so I can give them very detailed comment on how they've worked with the different parts of the rubric. And then the third way in SpeedGrader, once you finish with the rubric, is that you can provide end notes. So assignment comments, these are overall comments, end note comments about the work. So there are 3 different ways that you can provide feedback on any one piece of work here. It's mostly written work here inside of Canvas. You can also do media comments. Some of the other ways in which you can provide feedback to students with regard to assessment is in your quizzes. If you do quizzes, there's a place for you to provide feedback that's really asynchronous and sort of generalized, but it is a place where if a student picks one answer, that you can anticipate what you would want to say to that student about picking that answer, whether it's correct or incorrect. So that's another place where you can provide feedback to students that they get immediately, even though it's asynchronous. And then you might be asking, well, what if the students aren't engaged with me at all? What if they're not even turning in work? I mean, that makes it pretty hard to engage with them, and I would agree completely. And I think that's a real challenge that I hope that we can discuss and try to figure out different ways that we can get students to the table in the first place. One of the ways might be in the gradebook. There's a little tool here for each assignment And so on assignment P1, for example, these three vertical dots, if you click on that, you have a tool right here called Message Students Who. And so when you select that, you can message students who haven't submitted their work yet. You could also message students who have submitted their work yet, but who've scored a particular score lower than or higher than a particular score. So this is another way to provide students with feedback. Now, I know that that was a lot of information. There are some really good tools inside of Canvas that can really help with promoting engagement with students, and that is really what we're here to talk about. And I want to thank you very much for joining us. We hope to see you again.